The doctor said I had 3 months to live. So I did something most mothers would never do. I made myself disappear. I walked away from my mansion, my money, my entire life. And I went to see which of my sons would take me in when I had absolutely nothing left to give. My name is Alara Vance, and I'm 78 years old. I didn't think I'd ever tell this story. Not because it's too painful, though it is, but because for most of my life, I believed some things were better left unsaid. I believed that silence was dignity. That keeping your hurt private was strength. I was wrong. I'm telling you this now because I learned something in the last few months of my life. Something I wish I'd understood 50 years ago. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. Maybe not. But at least I would have known the truth sooner. I lived in Seattle. A big house on the hill. 10 bedrooms. A view of the water. Marble floors so shiny you could see your reflection. I had everything anyone could want. Money. Comfort. Space. But I was alone. I don't mean alone like no one lived nearby. I mean alone in the kind of way that makes you wonder if you'd been erased. My phone barely rang. My sons, my 3 boys, only called when they needed something. A signature. A check. Permission to sell a property. I told myself it was normal. They were busy. Successful. They had lives. But the truth? I knew. I knew they didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I could give them. And the worst part? I let it happen. I spent decades writing checks, fixing problems, bailing them out, and never once asking, "Do you even care that I exist?" I was scared of the answer. 3 months ago, my doctor sat across from me in his office and said the words I'd been half expecting for years. "Mrs. Vance, your heart is failing." He said it gently. Professionally. Like he'd practiced. "How long?" I asked. "A few months. Maybe less." I nodded. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at my hands. These old, wrinkled hands that had signed so many checks. Built so much wealth. And for what? I went home that night and sat in my chair by the window. The house was silent. No one called. No one knocked. I stared out at the city lights and I thought about my funeral. Who would come? Richard? Steve? Would they cry? Or would they just sit there, waiting for the lawyer to read the will? That's when I realized something. I didn't want to die without knowing the truth. I didn't want to leave this world wondering if my sons had ever loved me at all. So I made a decision. A dangerous one. Maybe even a cruel one. I decided to test them. But here's the thing, I didn't just ask them. I couldn't. Because people lie when there's money involved. So I did something most mothers would never do. I made myself disappear. I called my lawyer the next morning. Mr. Henderson had been with me for 30 years. He knew every contract, every property, every stock I owned. He was the only person I trusted completely. When I told him what I wanted to do, he went quiet for a long time. "Mrs. Vance," he finally said, "are you sure about this?" "I'm dying, Henderson. I need to know." He sighed. "This could backfire. Badly. Then at least I'll know the truth before I go." It took 2 weeks to set everything up. We transferred all my assets into a blind trust. On paper, I owned nothing. My bank accounts showed zero. My properties were moved into legal entities I had no access to. To the world, to my sons, I looked completely broke. Henderson made sure everything was airtight. If anyone checked, they'd see exactly what I wanted them to see, an old woman who'd lost everything. I packed a small bag. I didn't bring jewelry. I didn't bring my good coat. I found an old dress in the back of my closet, something I hadn't worn in 20 years. It had a stain on the collar. I left it there. I looked at myself in the mirror before I left. I looked poor. Tired. Desperate. Perfect. I called my housekeeper and told her I was going on a trip. I didn't say where. I didn't say for how long. Then I walked out the front door of my mansion, got into a taxi, and asked the driver to take me to the bus station. He looked at me funny. "You sure, ma'am? You want the bus station?" "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." The bus to New York left at 6 in the morning. I sat in the back, pressed against the window, watching Seattle disappear behind me. My heart was pounding. Not from my condition. From fear. What if I was wrong? What if Richard took me in, held me, told me everything was going to be okay? But there was another fear, deeper and sharper. What if I was right? The bus ride took 3 days. I stayed in cheap motels. I ate gas station sandwiches. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with my thoughts, rehearsing what I'd say. I lost everything. I need help. Please. It felt humiliating, even though it wasn't real. But that was the point, wasn't it? To see what they'd do when I had nothing left to give. By the time I reached New York, I was exhausted. My legs ached. My chest felt tight. I stood outside Richard's building and stared up at it. Glass. Steel. 60 floors. He lived on the top. I took the elevator up. My hands were shaking. When I knocked on his door, I heard music. Laughter. Voices. A woman in a black dress opened the door. She looked me up and down, her smile fading. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Richard," I said. "I'm his mother." Her eyes widened. She hesitated. Then she stepped aside and whispered something to someone inside. A moment later, Richard appeared. He was wearing a suit. Expensive. His hair was perfect. He looked at me, and I saw it immediately, the flash of horror in his eyes. Not concern. Not love. Horror. "Mom?" he said, his voice low. "What are you doing here?" My voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." He glanced over his shoulder. I could see people inside. Well-dressed. Important looking. He turned back to me, his jaw tight. "This isn't a good time. Richard, please." Not here." He grabbed my arm and pulled me down the hall, away from the door. Away from his guests. We stood in the hallway, and I could see the anger in his face. "What the hell are you doing, showing up like this?" he hissed. "Do you know who's in there? I have investors. Partners? You look like." He stopped himself. "Like what?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his mouth pressed into a thin line. "I lost everything," I said. The words felt like stones in my throat. "The money. The house. It's all gone." His face didn't change. No shock. No sympathy. "What do you mean, gone?" "Bad investments. Legal fees. I don't know, Richard. It just disappeared." He ran a hand through his hair. He looked back toward his apartment, then at me. "You can't stay here," he said. I felt something crack inside my chest. "I'm your mother." "I know. But I have a life, Mom. I have a reputation. I can't just." He pulled out his wallet, counted out some bills. "Here. 500. Get a motel. Get yourself cleaned up. I'll call you in a few days, and we'll figure something out." He pressed the money into my hand. "Richard. I have to go." He turned and walked back toward his apartment. The door opened. The music got louder. He stepped inside. And the door closed. I stood there in the hallway, holding $500, and I realized something. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even look me in the eye. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. I spent that night in a motel off the highway. The kind with stained carpets and a flickering neon sign outside. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the $500 Richard had given me. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the way he looked at me. Like I was a problem. Like I was something embarrassing he needed to hide. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, replaying the conversation over and over. Maybe I'd caught him at a bad time. Maybe if I'd called first. Maybe if I hadn't looked so. No. I stopped myself. This was the test. This was exactly what I needed to see. But I wasn't done yet. I still had Steve. The bus to Chicago left the next morning. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, but I forced myself to stay awake. I needed to be sharp. I needed to see this through. Steve was different from Richard. He'd always been the charming one. The one who smiled easily, who knew how to work a room. He was a politician now, running for state senate. I'd seen his commercials. A voice for the people. Fighting for families. I wondered if that included his own. Chicago was colder than New York. The wind cut through my thin coat as I stood outside Steve's townhouse. It was nice. Not as flashy as Richard's place, but polished. Perfect. The kind of house that said, "I'm successful, but I'm still one of you." I knocked. A young man answered. An aide, probably. He looked at me with polite confusion. "I'm here to see Steve Vance," I said. "I'm his mother." His eyes flickered. "One moment, please." He closed the door. I stood on the porch, waiting. I could hear voices inside. Muffled. Tense. The door opened again. This time it was Steve. He looked good. His shirt was pressed. His smile was practiced. But when he saw me, the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mom." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you." He glanced up and down the street, like he was checking if anyone was watching. "You should have called first." "I lost my phone," I lied. "Steve, I'm in trouble. I lost everything. The house, the money. I have nowhere to go." His face shifted. Not concern. Calculation. "What do you mean, you lost everything?" I told him the same story I'd told Richard. Bad investments. Legal trouble. I watched his face carefully, looking for something, anything, that looked like love. He rubbed his jaw. "Mom, this is really bad timing." "Bad timing?" "I'm in the middle of a campaign. Do you know how this looks? If people find out my mother is," he stopped himself. "Is what?" I asked. "Poor. Homeless?" He looked away. "It's not that simple. I have donors. Opponents. They'll use this against me. They'll say I can't even take care of my own family." "Then take care of me," I said quietly. He was silent for a long moment. "I can't have you here," he finally said. "Not right now. But I can help. I have connections. I can get you into a facility, a good one. State-funded, but clean. They'll take care of you." "A facility?" "A nursing home, Mom. It's not ideal, but it's something. And once the election is over, we can figure out something better. I promise." A nursing home. He wanted to put me in a nursing home. "I'm 78, Steve. Not 90. I don't need a nursing home. I need my son." His jaw tightened. "I'm doing the best I can." "Are you?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The same thing I'd seen in Richard's eyes. I was a liability. I'll have my assistant make some calls, he said. Give me a number where I can reach you. I don't have a number. Then. I'll figure something out. He glanced at the door. Just give me a few days, okay? He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed me $300. Get a room. Get some food. I'll be in touch. And then he went back inside. The door closed. I stood there on his porch, holding $300, and I felt something inside me break. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just emptiness. I walked for a long time that day. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. My legs hurt. My chest ached. But I kept moving because if I stopped, I'd have to think. And I wasn't ready to think yet. I found a bench in a park and sat down. I watched people pass by. Families. Couples. A woman pushing a stroller. Everyone looked so connected. I pulled out my phone, the one I'd told Steve I didn't have, and stared at the screen. I had one son left. Noah. I hadn't spoken to him in 8 years. He'd called me, once, to tell me he was getting married. Her name was Maria. She worked at a diner. She didn't have a college degree. She didn't come from money. I told him he was making a mistake. I told him he was throwing his life away. He said, I love her, Mom. And I said, love doesn't pay the bills. He stopped calling after that. Richard told me Noah had moved to Texas. That he worked in some garage, fixing cars. That he was barely getting by. I'd convinced myself he was better off without me. That I'd done the right thing by cutting him off. But now, sitting on that bench in Chicago, I realized something. Noah was my last chance. Not to be saved. But to know if I'd been loved at all. So I got on a bus to Austin, Texas. And I prayed I wasn't too late. The bus to Austin took 2 days. I sat in the back again, watching the country change outside the window. Cities turned into farmland. Farmland turned into flat, dry earth. The further south I went, the hotter it got. Even the air felt different. Heavier. I thought about Noah the whole way. I remembered him as a boy. He was the youngest. The sweetest. The one who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read him stories. Richard and Steve were always busy, always competing with each other. But Noah just wanted to be near me. I remembered the day he told me about Maria. He was 24. His eyes were so bright. He said, Mom, I met someone. She's amazing. I want you to meet her. I should have said yes. I should have been happy for him. But I wasn't. I asked him where she worked. What her family did. What her plans were. And when he told me, a diner, no college, no money, I said the words I'd regret for the rest of my life. You can do better. His face fell. Better? You come from a good family, Noah. You have opportunities. Don't throw them away on some girl who. Some girl. His voice cracked. Her name is Maria, Mom. And I love her. Love isn't enough. It is for me. We fought. I don't even remember all the things I said. But I remember the last thing he said to me. If you can't be happy for me, then I don't need you in my life. And I said, fine. Fine. That was 8 years ago. And now I was on a bus to his town, wearing rags, carrying nothing, hoping he'd even open the door. Austin was hotter than I expected. The kind of heat that made your clothes stick to your skin. I got off the bus and stood in the station, staring at the address I'd written down. Henderson had found it for me before I left Seattle. It wasn't far. Just a few miles outside the city. I took a taxi. The driver didn't say much. He dropped me off in front of a small auto repair shop. The sign was faded, Noah's Garage. My heart was pounding. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the building. It was small. Dusty. A truck was parked out front with the hood up. I could hear the sound of tools clanging inside. I almost turned around. But then I thought about Richard. About Steve. About dying alone in that big empty house in Seattle. And I walked toward the door. The inside of the garage smelled like oil and metal. It was cluttered. Parts everywhere. A radio playing country music in the corner. And then I saw him. Noah was bent over an engine, a wrench in his hand. He was thinner than I remembered. His clothes were stained. His hands were black with grease. But when he looked up and saw me, his face did something I hadn't seen in months. It broke. "Mom?" His voice cracked. He dropped the wrench. It clattered to the floor. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He walked toward me slowly, like he wasn't sure I was real. "Mom, what?" He looked me up and down. His eyes went wide. "What happened to you?" And that's when I started crying. I hadn't cried in front of Richard. I hadn't cried in front of Steve. But standing there, looking at my youngest son, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I lost everything," I whispered. I didn't know where else to go. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me. "It's okay," he said, his voice shaking. "It's okay, Mom. You're here now. You're safe." And for the first time in months, maybe years, I believed it. Noah closed the garage early. He helped me into his truck, an old beat-up thing that rattled when it moved. He kept looking over at me, like he was afraid I'd disappear. "I can't believe you're here," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't call." "Don't." He shook his head. "Don't apologize. I'm glad you're here." We drove through town. Past fast food places and gas stations. Past neighborhoods with small houses and chain-link fences. He pulled into a trailer park. "This is it," he said quietly. The trailer was small. Pale blue. The steps creaked when we walked up them. Noah opened the door and called out, "Maria? I brought someone." A woman appeared from the back. She was young. Maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing an apron. When she saw me, she froze. "Noah." "This is my mom," he said. She needs help." Maria looked at me. I waited for the judgment. The resentment. I'd said terrible things about her. I'd tried to stop their wedding. But she didn't say any of that. She just smiled, soft and kind, and said, "You must be exhausted. Come sit down." They gave me water. They made me soup. Maria pulled out a chair at their tiny kitchen table and insisted I sit. I looked around the trailer. It was small. Cramped. But it was clean. There were pictures on the walls. A couch with a blanket folded neatly on the arm. A vase with flowers on the counter. It was a home. "You can stay as long as you need," Noah said. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." His voice was firm. "You're my mom." That night, Noah insisted I take their bed. He said he'd sleep on the couch. "Noah, I can't." "Mom." He put his hand on my shoulder. "Please. Let me do this." So I did. I lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, and I thought about Richard's hallway. About Steve's porch. And I realized something. This was the first time in months I'd felt like I mattered. I stayed with Noah for 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, I learned what love actually looks like. I woke up the first morning to the smell of coffee. I hadn't slept that well in years. My body still ached, my heart was still failing, but I felt rested in a way I couldn't explain. When I came out of the bedroom, Maria was in the kitchen, making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Nothing fancy. But she set a plate down in front of me like it was a feast. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. "Better than I have in a long time." She smiled. "Good." Noah came in from outside, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd already been working. It was barely 7 in the morning. "I called the garage," he said. "Told them I'm taking the week off." "Noah, you don't have to do that." "I want to." He sat down across from me. "I want to spend time with you." I looked at him, and I felt something twist in my chest. Not pain. Guilt. I'd spent 8 years convincing myself he was the one who'd walked away. But I was the one who'd pushed him out. The days blurred together in the best way. Noah took me to the grocery store. He drove me around Austin, showing me the places he liked. Maria taught me how to make her grandmother's tamales. We sat on the front steps in the evenings, drinking iced tea, watching the sun go down. They didn't have much. Their trailer was small. Their furniture was old. They were living paycheck to paycheck. But they had something Richard and Steve didn't. They had each other. And they made room for me. One night, I asked Maria why she was being so kind to me. We were sitting in the living room. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch. Maria was folding laundry. "I know what I said about you," I told her quietly. "Before the wedding. I was cruel." She looked at me for a long moment. "You were scared," she said. "That's not an excuse." "No. But it's the truth." She set down the towel she was folding. "You thought I wasn't good enough for him. And maybe, by your standards, I wasn't. But Noah didn't care about standards. He cared about love." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I know." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "And I forgive you." I wanted to tell Noah the truth so many times. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't really broke. That this was all a test. That I'd have Henderson reverse everything and he'd never have to worry about money again. But every time I opened my mouth, I stopped myself. Because I realized something. Noah didn't care about the money. He'd taken me in when I had nothing. He'd given me his bed, his food, his time. He'd welcomed me into his life without asking for anything in return. And if I told him the truth now, it would ruin it. It would make him wonder if I'd ever trusted him at all. On the 18th day, I woke up feeling different. Heavier. My chest hurt more than usual. My breathing was shallow. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to calm down, but I knew what was happening. My heart was giving out. I'd known this was coming. The doctor had told me. A few months, maybe less. But I didn't think it would be so soon. I walked into the living room. Noah was already awake, making coffee. "Morning, Mom." "Good morning." He looked at me. His smile faded. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine, Mom." "I'm fine, Noah." I smiled. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. And I think he knew it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the trailer. The hum of the refrigerator. The creak of the floor when someone shifted in the other room. I thought about Richard. About Steve. About the way they'd looked at me. And I thought about Noah. About the way he'd held me when I arrived. About the way he'd given up his week to be with me. I'd spent my whole life building wealth. Accumulating things. Making sure my sons would never want for anything. But in the end, only one of them loved me. And he was the one I'd pushed away. I died 3 days later. It was peaceful. I went to sleep, and I didn't wake up. Noah found me in the morning. I wasn't there to see his face. But I imagine he cried. I imagine Maria held him. I imagine they sat together in that small trailer and grieved for the mother who'd finally come home. Henderson called Richard and Steve. They arrived 2 days later for the funeral. I wasn't there to see it, but Henderson told me later, well, not me, but he told Noah what happened. Richard pulled up in a black Mercedes. Steve came in a town car. They were both wearing expensive suits. They looked annoyed. Inconvenienced. The funeral was small. Just a few people. Maria's family. Some neighbors. Noah stood at the front, his face red and swollen from crying. Richard and Steve stood in the back. They didn't cry. After the service, Henderson asked everyone to stay. Mrs. Vance left a will, he said. I've been instructed to read it now. Richard and Steve straightened up. I imagine they glanced at each other. I imagine they smiled. Finally, they thought. Finally, we get what we deserve. Henderson opened the envelope. And that's when everything I'd planned, everything I'd hoped for, finally came to light. Henderson cleared his throat. The room was silent. Richard and Steve stood near the back, arms crossed, waiting. Noah sat in the front row, his head down, Maria's hand in his. Henderson adjusted his glasses and began to read. I, Elara Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Richard shifted his weight. Steve glanced at his watch. Henderson continued. To my son Richard, who built an empire but forgot where he came from. Richard's head snapped up. I leave nothing. You have your penthouse. Your investors. Your reputation. You already have everything you wanted. You don't need anything from me. The room went still. Richard's face turned red. What? Henderson didn't stop. To my son Steve, who fought for families but not for his own. Steve stepped forward. Wait. I leave nothing. You have your career. Your image. Your campaign. You told me I was bad for your reputation. So I'm removing myself from it entirely. Steve's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Noah looked up, confused. I don't understand. Henderson turned to him. To my son Noah, who gave a homeless woman his bed when he barely had one to spare. Noah's eyes widened. I leave my entire estate. All properties. All assets. All accounts. The house in Seattle. The investments. Everything? Henderson paused. The total value is approximately $80 million. The room exploded. What? Richard shouted. That's insane. She was broke. She was never broke, Henderson said calmly. She transferred everything into a blind trust 3 months ago. It was a test. Steve stared at him. A test? Yes. She wanted to know which of her sons would take care of her when she had nothing to offer. When there was no money. No inheritance. No benefit. Henderson looked at Richard and Steve. You both failed. Richard lunged forward. This is fraud. She wasn't in her right mind. She was fully competent, Henderson said. I have medical documentation. Psychiatric evaluation. Everything was done legally. I want to contest this. You can try. Henderson's voice was ice. But it won't change anything. The will is ironclad. Steve turned to Noah. You knew about this? Noah was staring at the floor, tears streaming down his face. No. I didn't know. Bullshit, Richard spat. You played us? You and her. I didn't know. Noah's voice cracked. He stood up, shaking. I didn't know she had money. I thought she was actually. He couldn't finish. Maria stood and put her arm around him. We took her in because she was his mother, Maria said quietly. Not because of money. We didn't even know there was money. Richard laughed bitterly. Right. Sure you didn't. Believe what you want, Henderson said. But the facts are clear. Mrs. Vance arrived at both of your homes, destitute and desperate. You turned her away. Noah took her in. He cared for her. He gave her the last peaceful weeks of her life. He handed Noah an envelope. The keys to the Seattle house. The account information. Everything you need. Noah took the envelope with trembling hands. He looked at his brothers. I'm sorry, he whispered. Richard's face twisted. Sorry? You're sorry? This isn't what I wanted. You took everything from us. No. Henderson's voice cut through the room. Your mother took nothing from you. She gave you a choice. And you chose poorly. Richard and Steve left without another word. They didn't say goodbye to Noah. They didn't stay for the burial. They just got in their cars and drove away. Noah stood there, holding the envelope, staring at nothing. I don't want it, he said. Henderson looked at him. What? The money. The house. I don't want it. Noah. She was my mom. His voice broke. I didn't take care of her because I thought I'd get something. I did it because I loved her. Maria squeezed his hand. I know, Henderson said gently. And that's exactly why she left it to you. That night, Noah sat on the steps of the trailer, staring up at the stars. Maria came out and sat beside him. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. I keep thinking about the last 8 years, he finally said. All that time we didn't talk. All that time she spent alone. She came back, Maria said softly. That's what matters. But what if she hadn't? What if she just died? And I never saw her again? Maria leaned her head on his shoulder. But she did come back. And you were here. You gave her love when she needed it most. Noah closed his eyes. I just wish I'd had more time. I wasn't there for that conversation. But if I could have been, I would have told him this. Those 3 weeks were enough. In those 3 weeks, I learned more about love than I had in 78 years. I learned that love isn't about what you can give. It's about who shows up when you have nothing left. And here's the part I need you to understand. The part that changed everything. Let me tell you what happened in the weeks before I died. Not the big moments. Not the will or the test or the money. The small things. Because those were the things that mattered. On the 4th day at Noah's trailer, I woke up to the sound of rain. It was early. The sun wasn't up yet. I lay there listening to the water hit the metal roof, and I remembered something. When Noah was 5, he was terrified of thunderstorms. He'd run into my room in the middle of the night, crying, shaking. I'd pull him into bed with me and hold him until the storm passed. I'd tell him stories. Make up silly songs. Anything to distract him. Richard and Steve never did that. They slept through storms like nothing was happening. But Noah needed me. And I was there. I'd forgotten that. For years, I'd focused on all the ways I'd failed him. The things I'd said. The wedding I didn't attend. The 8 years of silence. But lying there, listening to the rain, I remembered. I was there when he needed me. And now, he was here when I needed him. On the 7th day, Noah came home from the garage with grease all over his hands. Sorry, he said, laughing. I tried to wash up, but this stuff doesn't come off easy. I looked at his hands. They were rough. Calloused. stained black in the creases. Richard's hands were soft, manicured. Steve's too. But Noah's hands. They'd worked for everything he had. "Let me see," I said. He held them out, embarrassed. I took them in mine, turned them over, traced the lines in his palms. "These are good hands," I said. He smiled. "They're dirty. They're honest." On the 12th day, Maria asked me if I wanted to go to church with them. I hadn't been to church in decades. I'd stopped believing in a lot of things a long time ago. But I said yes. It was a small church. Wooden pews. A piano in the corner. Maybe 30 people. The pastor talked about forgiveness. About second chances. About how it's never too late to come home. I sat between Noah and Maria, and I cried. Not loud. Not obvious. Just quiet tears rolling down my face. Noah reached over and held my hand. He didn't ask why I was crying. He just held my hand. And that was enough. On the 15th day, I told Noah about his father. We were sitting on the front steps. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink. "You never talk about Dad," Noah said. I'd been avoiding it for years. His father, my husband, had died when Noah was 10. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. "He would have been proud of you," I said. Noah looked at me. "Really? Really?" I smiled. "He always said you had the biggest heart of all of us." I don't remember him saying that. "You were young." But he said it all the time. He'd watch you play with your trucks, and he'd say, "That one's going to be okay. He knows what matters." Noah's eyes filled with tears. "I miss him," he said. "Me too." We sat there in silence, watching the sky change colors. And I realized something. This moment, this exact moment, was what I'd been missing my whole life. Not money. Not success. Not a big house or a fancy car. Just this. Sitting with my son. Watching the sunset. Being together. On the 18th day, I woke up and knew it was almost over. My chest was tight. My breathing was shallow. I could feel my heart struggling. I didn't tell Noah. I didn't want to scare him. I just tried to enjoy the day. Maria made pancakes. Noah told me about a car he was working on. We watched a game show on TV. Normal things. Beautiful things. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote a letter. Not to Noah. Not to Richard or Steve. To myself. I wrote about the test. About what I'd learned. About the choice I'd made. And at the end, I wrote this. I spent my whole life thinking love was something you earned. Something you bought. Something you proved. But love isn't something you earn. It's something you give. And the only person who gave it freely, without condition, without expectation, was the one I'd pushed away. I'm grateful I got to come back. I'm grateful I got to see him one last time. And I'm grateful I finally understand. Love isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when you have nothing left. I folded the letter and put it in the envelope Henderson would read later. Then I lay down in Noah's bed, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and closed my eyes. I thought about Richard. About Steve. About the lives they'd built and the things they'd chosen. And I thought about Noah. About the way he'd hugged me when I arrived. About the way he'd given me his bed. About the way he'd loved me when I had nothing to offer. I thought about my husband. About the life we'd built. About the mistakes I'd made. And I thought about myself. About the woman I'd been. About the woman I'd become. I wasn't perfect. I'd failed in so many ways. But in the end, I got one thing right. I came home. And when I took my last breath, I wasn't in a mansion. I was in a trailer in Texas, surrounded by love. I need to tell you something I haven't said yet. Something about why I became the person I was. Because it's easy to look at my story and think I was just a cruel mother. A woman who cared more about money than people. A woman who pushed away her own son because he married the wrong girl. And maybe that's true. But it's not the whole truth. I grew up with nothing. My father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned houses. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that only worked half the time. I wore my sister's hand-me-downs. I ate the same meal 5 nights a week. I watched my mother count pennies at the grocery store, trying to figure out if we could afford milk that week. And I promised myself, one day, I'd never live like that again. I was 17 when I met Thomas, Noah's father. He was older. 25. He had a good job. A car. He wore a clean shirt every day. I thought he was the answer to everything. We got married 6 months later. I was 18. And for a while, things were good. He worked hard. We saved money. We bought a small house. Then a bigger one. Then properties. Investments. By the time Richard was born, we were wealthy. By the time Steve came along, we were very wealthy. And by the time Noah arrived, 10 years later, a surprise, we had more money than I'd ever dreamed of. But Thomas was different by then. He worked all the time. 16-hour days. He barely came home. And when he did, he was exhausted. Distant. I raised the boys mostly alone. Richard and Steve were easy. They were ambitious. Competitive. They wanted success, and I gave them the tools to get it. But Noah was different. He didn't care about money. He didn't care about status. He just wanted to be happy. And I didn't know what to do with that. When Thomas died, I fell apart. I didn't show it. I kept working. Kept managing the estate. Kept everything running. But inside, I was drowning. I threw myself into the money. Into the investments. Into making sure my sons would never struggle the way I had. And I convinced myself that was love. Providing. Protecting. Making sure they had everything they needed. But I forgot to ask them what they actually needed. Richard needed validation. Steve needed approval. Noah needed presence. And I gave none of them what they were asking for. When Noah told me he was marrying Maria, I panicked. I saw him throwing away everything I'd built. Everything I'd worked for. I saw him choosing a life of struggle. Of poverty. Of the same kind of pain I'd grown up with. And I couldn't stand it. So I said terrible things. I told him he was making a mistake. I told him Maria wasn't good enough. I told him he'd regret it. And when he said, "If you can't be happy for me, then I don't need you in my life," I didn't fight back. I let him go. Because part of me thought he'd come back. He'd realize I was right. He'd see that love wasn't enough. But he never came back. And I was too proud to reach out. For 8 years, I told myself I'd done the right thing. Richard and Steve called me. They asked for money. They asked for advice. They stayed in my life. So I convinced myself I'd succeeded with them. But the truth? They didn't stay because they loved me. They stayed because I was useful. And Noah didn't leave because he stopped loving me. He left because I hurt him. When the doctor told me I was dying, I had a choice. I could die the way I'd lived. Surrounded by money. Alone in a big house. Convinced I'd done everything right. Or I could find out the truth. So I created the test. Not to punish Richard and Steve. Not even to reward Noah. But to know. To finally, after 78 years, understand what love actually meant. And here's what I learned. Love isn't what you give when it's easy. It's what you give when it costs you something. Richard had money, but he couldn't spare a room. Steve had connections, but he couldn't spare his reputation. Noah had nothing, but he gave me everything. He gave me his bed, his time, his home, his heart. Not because he thought he'd get something in return, but because that's who he was. I think about the life I gave my sons. Richard got wealth. Steve got opportunity. Noah got nothing. But in the end, Noah was the richest one. Because he understood something I spent my whole life missing. Love isn't something you buy. It's something you build. One meal at a time. One conversation at a time. One quiet evening at a time. And you can't buy that. You can only give it. I wish I'd learned that sooner. But at least I learned it before I died. There's something else I need to tell you. Something about the woman I was before all of this happened. Because it's easy to paint me as the hero of this story now. The wise old woman who tested her sons and learned a beautiful lesson. But that's not who I was. For most of my life, I was cold. I remember a moment when Richard was 12. He came home from school crying. Some kids had made fun of him. Called him names. He wanted me to hold him. I was in the middle of a business call. I put my hand over the phone and said, "Richard, go to your room. I'll talk to you later." I never did. By the time I finished the call, he'd stopped crying. He'd locked himself in his room. And when I knocked, he said, "I'm fine, Mom." I believed him because it was easier. I remember when Steve was 16. He'd made the basketball team. He was so excited. He wanted me to come to his first game. I had a meeting with investors. I told him I couldn't make it. He said, "Please, Mom. Just this once." I said, "Steve, this is important." And he said, "So am I." I went to the meeting. He stopped asking me to come to his games after that. And Noah. God, Noah. I remember when he was 8. He drew me a picture at school. A picture of the two of us holding hands. He colored it carefully. Stayed inside the lines. He ran up to me when I got home, so proud. "Look, Mom. I made this for you." I glanced at it. I was tired. I had a headache. I said, "That's nice, honey. Put it on the fridge." He did. And it stayed there for 2 weeks before I threw it away to make room for a grocery list. I wasn't cruel. I didn't yell. I didn't hit. I didn't scream. But I wasn't there. Not really. I was present in body, but absent in every other way. I was always thinking about the next deal. The next investment. The next property. I told myself I was doing it for them. To give them a better life. But the truth? I was doing it for me. Because as long as I was busy, I didn't have to feel anything. I didn't have to grieve Thomas. I didn't have to face my loneliness. I didn't have to admit that I had no idea how to love without conditions. When Noah told me he was marrying Maria, it wasn't just about the money. It was about control. I'd built this life. This empire. And I wanted my sons to fit into it. Richard did. He became everything I wanted him to be. Ambitious. Successful. Cold. Steve did. He learned how to smile and charm and manipulate. Just like I had. But Noah refused. He wanted something different. Something I didn't understand. He wanted to be happy. And I punished him for it. The night after he told me he was getting married, I lay awake in bed and thought about calling him. I thought about saying, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Come home. Bring Maria. Let me meet her." But I didn't. Because I convinced myself that if I gave in, I'd lose. And I couldn't lose. So I let him walk away. And I told myself it was his choice. For 8 years, I lived with that decision. Richard called me every few months. Always asking for something. Money for a new development. Help with a contract. A loan for an expansion. I gave it to him. Every time. Steve called too. Asking for donations to his campaign. Connections to donors. Endorsements. I gave him everything he asked for. And I told myself this was proof. Proof that I'd done something right. Proof that my sons needed me. But they didn't need me. They needed my money. And I knew it. Deep down, I knew it. But I didn't want to face it. When I got sick, something shifted. I started having dreams about Noah. I'd see him as a little boy, climbing into my lap with a book. I'd see him at 8, holding up that drawing. I'd see him at 24, his face falling when I told him he could do better. And I'd wake up with this ache in my chest. Not from my heart condition. From regret. That's when I called Henderson. I said, I need to know the truth. He said, what truth? If they love me. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Mrs. Vance, with all due respect, I think you already know the answer. Then I need to be sure. Creating the test wasn't easy. It meant admitting that I didn't trust my own sons. It meant facing the possibility that I'd spent 78 years building something that didn't matter. But I had to know. So I became someone else. I put on old clothes. I emptied my accounts, on paper. I walked away from everything I'd built. And I went to see if anyone would love me without it. Standing outside Richard's building, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From hope. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped he'd open the door, see me, and pull me inside. I hoped he'd say, Mom, what happened? It doesn't matter. You're staying here. We'll figure it out. But he didn't. And when he handed me that money and closed the door, I felt something inside me die. Not anger. Relief. Because at least now I knew. It was the same with Steve. When he talked about putting me in a nursing home, when he looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, I felt that same terrible relief. Now I knew. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And when I couldn't do anything, I was nothing. But Noah. God, Noah. When he wrapped his arms around me in that garage, when he held me while I cried, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt seen. Not as a bank account. Not as a tool. Not as a means to an end. As a person. As his mother. In those 3 weeks at his trailer, I saw who I could have been. If I'd let go of the control. If I'd stopped trying to buy love. If I'd just been present. I could have had this all along. Not the money. Not the success. This. Sitting on a worn-out couch. Eating simple meals. Watching the sun set. Being loved. The night before I died, Noah asked me something. We were sitting outside. The air was warm. Crickets were chirping. Mom, he said, why did you really come here? I looked at him. I could have lied. I could have kept up the act. But I was so tired of lying. Because I needed to know if you still loved me, I said. His face crumpled. Of course I love you. I never stopped. Even after everything I said. Even after everything. And that's when I understood. Love isn't something you lose. It's something you choose. Every day. Every moment. Richard and Steve chose money. Noah chose me. And when I wrote that will, I didn't write it out of revenge. I wrote it as a mirror. After Henderson read the will, after Richard and Steve left, after Noah sat on those steps holding an envelope he never wanted, something happened. Something I didn't plan for. Because even though I was gone, the story didn't end. It kept moving. Noah didn't touch the money for 3 months. Henderson told me this later. Well, not me exactly, but he wrote it all down. He documented everything. Said it was important to understand what happened after. For 3 months, Noah went to work every day. Fixed cars. Came home to Maria. Lived in that same trailer. The envelope sat on their kitchen counter, unopened. Maria finally asked him about it one night. "Noah, you have to deal with this eventually." "I don't want it," he said. "I know. But it's yours now. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist." He looked at her. "What if it changes me?" She took his hand. "It won't. Not unless you let it." When Noah finally opened the envelope, he sat at that tiny kitchen table for hours. Bank statements. Property deeds. Investment accounts. $80 million. He could buy anything. Go anywhere. Never work another day in his life. But that's not what he did. The first thing Noah did was pay off Maria's student loans. She'd been carrying them for 10 years. $30,000. She paid a little every month, but the interest kept piling up. He paid it off in full. When she found out, she cried. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to." The second thing he did was fix up the garage. New tools. Better equipment. He hired 2 employees, kids from the neighborhood who needed work. He didn't expand. He didn't franchise. He didn't turn it into an empire. He just made it better. The third thing he did was call Richard. Not Steve. Just Richard. He didn't tell me why he chose Richard first. Maybe because he was the oldest. Maybe because Noah still remembered Richard reading to him when they were kids, before everything changed. The phone rang 4 times before Richard picked up. "What do you want?" Richard's voice was ice. "I want to talk," Noah said. "There's nothing to talk about." "Please, Richard. Just give me 5 minutes." Silence. Then, "Fine. 5 minutes." They met at a coffee shop in New York. Richard showed up 20 minutes late. He sat down across from Noah, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Well?" Richard said. "What's so important?" Noah slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" "Open it." Richard opened it. Inside was a check. $2 million. His eyes went wide. "What is this?" "Your share," Noah said quietly. "I know Mom left me everything. But you're still my brother. I don't want money to be the reason we stop talking." Richard stared at the check. "This is guilt money," he said. "No. It's family money." Richard pushed the check back across the table. "I don't want your charity. It's not charity, Richard. It's... You think you're better than me." Richard's voice was shaking. "You think because Mom chose you, that makes you the good son? I don't think that. I gave her everything. I built a business from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks. And she left me with nothing because I didn't let her move into my penthouse when she showed up in rags." Noah was quiet for a moment. "She wasn't really broke, Richard. I know that." Richard slammed his hand on the table. People turned to look. He lowered his voice. "I know that now. But how was I supposed to know then? She looked like she looked." His voice cracked. "She looked like she needed help," Noah said softly. "And you turned her away." Richard's face twisted. "I had investors in my apartment. Do you know what that would have done to me? Showing up with a homeless woman. She was your mother. And you're so perfect?" Richard leaned forward. "You took her in because you're broke, Noah. You didn't have anything to lose." Noah stood up. You're right, he said. I didn't have anything to lose. But I didn't take her in because of that. I took her in because I loved her. He left the check on the table and walked out. Richard sat there, staring at it, for a long time. Noah tried with Steve too. He called. Left messages. Sent emails. Steve never responded. Not once. 6 months after I died, Noah sold the Seattle house. Not because he didn't want it. But because it was too big. Too empty. Too full of memories that didn't belong to him. He sold it for $12 million. He donated half to a foundation for single mothers. The other half, he put into a trust for his future kids. If we have kids, he told Maria, I want them to have opportunities. But I don't want money to be the only thing they know about me. A year later, Richard showed up at Noah's garage. He didn't call first. He just appeared one afternoon, standing in the doorway in a suit that probably cost more than Noah made in 6 months. Noah was under a car. He rolled out, saw Richard, and froze. Hey, Richard said. Hey. They stared at each other. I cashed the check, Richard finally said. Noah nodded. Okay. I didn't want to. But my accountant said I was being an idiot. Noah almost smiled. Richard shifted his weight. I've been thinking about what you said. About Mom. About everything? Yeah. I was angry for a long time. At her. At you. At myself. I get that. Richard looked around the garage. At the tools. The cars. The oil-stained floor. This is a good place, he said. Thanks. You happy? Noah thought about it. Yeah. I am. Richard nodded slowly. Good. They stood there in awkward silence. Then Richard said, I'm sorry. Noah looked up. For what? For not being there. For her. For you. For being who I am. Richard. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I even want to. But I'm sorry. For what it's worth. Noah walked over and hugged him. Richard stiffened. Then, slowly, he hugged back. Steve never came around. He won his election. He's in office now. Noah sees him on the news sometimes. He looks successful. Polished. Happy. But Noah wonders if he ever thinks about that day. About Mom standing on his porch. About the choice he made. 2 years after I died, Maria got pregnant. Noah called Henderson, crying. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to be a dad. Yes, you do, Henderson said. You learned from the best. My dad died when I was 10. I'm not talking about your father, Henderson said. I'm talking about your mother. The woman who came back. The woman who chose you. When Maria went into labor, Richard flew to Texas. He showed up at the hospital at 3 in the morning, still wearing his suit from a business meeting. What are you doing here? Noah asked. I'm your brother, Richard said simply. Where else would I be? They sat in the waiting room together, drinking terrible coffee, not saying much. And when the baby was born, a girl, Richard held her and cried. What are you naming her? He asked. Noah looked at Maria. Maria nodded. Elara, Noah said. Her name is Elara. And somewhere, I like to think I was watching. Watching my boys become the men I always hoped they'd be. Here's the part that haunts me. Even now. Even after everything. Richard and Steve didn't know they were being tested. They thought I was just a broke old woman who'd lost everything. They made their choices based on what they saw in front of them. And maybe that's fair. Or maybe it's not. Because here's what I know now, what I couldn't see then, they'd been making that same choice for years. I just finally noticed. Think about it. When Richard stood in that hallway and handed me $500, he thought he was being generous. In his mind, he was helping. He gave me money. He arranged a ride. He didn't throw me out with nothing. He probably told himself he was a good son. And when Steve offered to get me into a nursing home, he thought he was solving my problem. In his mind, he was being practical. Responsible. He had a campaign to run. He couldn't just drop everything. He probably told himself he was doing his best. But here's what they didn't see. I didn't need money. I didn't need a facility. I needed them. And the cruelest part. I'd taught them that. I'd spent 50 years showing them that money solved everything. That success was what mattered. That love was something you proved through bank accounts and achievements. I'd taught them to be exactly who they were in those moments. And then I punished them for it. When Noah opened his door and saw me, he didn't see a problem to solve. He saw his mother. And that's the difference I'd spent my whole life missing. Noah didn't love me because I was rich. He loved me because I was his mom. Richard and Steve loved what I could provide. Noah loved who I was. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, or would, if I were still around to be kept up. What if I'd gone to Noah first? What if I'd shown up at his garage before I went to New York or Chicago? Would the story have been different? Would Richard and Steve have acted differently if they'd known it was a test? I don't think so. Because the test wasn't about one moment. It was about everything that came before it. Let me tell you what I learned in those 3 weeks at Noah's trailer. Things I noticed. Things that proved what I already suspected. Noah never asked me what happened. Not once. He didn't ask how I lost the money. He didn't ask about the house. He didn't ask if I'd made bad investments or gotten scammed. He just accepted that I needed help. And he helped. Maria was the same way. She never looked at me with suspicion. Never wondered if I was lying. Never asked uncomfortable questions. She just made me feel welcome. That's love. Not questioning. Not investigating. Not needing to understand every detail. Just showing up. One afternoon, about a week in, I was sitting in the living room while Noah worked on paperwork at the kitchen table. His phone rang. I could hear the conversation. "Hey, man, I know I said I'd have your truck done by Friday, but something came up. Family stuff. Can we push it to next week?" Pause. I know. I'm sorry. I'll knock $100 off the bill for the inconvenience." He hung up and rubbed his face. He was losing money to take care of me. And he never said a word about it. Another day, Maria came home from her shift at the diner exhausted. She'd been on her feet for 9 hours. Her back hurt. I could see it in the way she moved. But she still made dinner. Still asked me how my day was. Still smiled. "You should rest," I told her. "I can make something." "It's okay," she said. I liked cooking. But it wasn't about liking it. It was about making sure I felt cared for. And here's the moment that broke me. One night, about 2 weeks in, I woke up in the middle of the night. My chest hurt. I couldn't breathe right. I tried to be quiet. I didn't want to wake anyone. But Noah heard me. He came into the room in his pajamas, hair messy, eyes half closed. "Mom? You okay?" "I'm fine. Just couldn't sleep." He sat on the edge of the bed. "Does your chest hurt?" I hesitated. "A little." He didn't panic. He just nodded. "Want some water?" "Okay." He came back with water and some crackers. "Sometimes eating something helps," he said. "When Maria gets heartburn, crackers help." I ate the crackers. Drank the water. He sat with me until my breathing calmed down. "Better?" he asked. "Better." He started to leave, then turned back. "Mom? I'm really glad you're here." My throat tightened. "Me too, baby." He smiled and went back to the couch. And that's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. This was the son who loved me. Not for what I could give him, but for who I was. Meanwhile, Richard and Steve had no idea. They went back to their lives. Richard closed another deal. Steve won another debate. They probably thought about me sometimes. Probably wondered if I was okay. Maybe Richard felt a little guilty about the $500. Maybe Steve felt a little guilty about the nursing home. But not enough to call. Not enough to check. Not enough to find me. They'd done their part, in their minds. They'd offered help. I was the one who'd disappeared. That's what they told themselves, I'm sure of it. And maybe they even believed it. When Henderson read the will, when Richard and Steve realized what had happened, I imagine they felt betrayed. Tricked. Manipulated. And maybe they were right. Maybe I was cruel. Maybe I should have just asked them directly. Should have had a conversation. Should have given them a chance to explain. But I don't think it would have mattered. Because the truth was already there. In every phone call that was only about money. In every visit that was cut short. In every birthday they forgot. In every holiday I spent alone. The test didn't create the truth. It just revealed it. And Noah? Noah didn't know there was money waiting for him. He took me in thinking I had nothing. Thinking he'd be supporting me for the rest of my life, however long that was. He made that choice freely. Not for gain. Not for inheritance. Not for reward. Just for love. That's the irony, isn't it? The son who had nothing gave me everything. The sons who had everything gave me nothing. And in the end, the one who gave everything received everything. Not because I planned it that way. But because that's how love works. But here's the question I couldn't answer before I died. Was I teaching them a lesson? Or was I just proving what I'd always feared? Here's the thing nobody talks about. The thing that haunted me even as I lay dying in Noah's bed. I knew the whole time. I knew Richard would turn me away. I knew Steve would be ashamed of me. I knew Noah would take me in. I knew. When I stood outside Richard's building, wearing those old clothes, my heart wasn't pounding because I was afraid of being rejected. It was pounding because I already knew I would be. I'd raised him. I knew exactly who he was. Cold. Calculating. Obsessed with image. I'd made him that way. Every time I praised him for a business deal instead of asking how he felt. Every time I sent money instead of showing up. Every time I chose work over him. I built Richard into the man who would close the door on me. And Steve. God, Steve was even worse because I saw it coming from miles away. He learned early that appearances mattered more than truth. That what people thought was more important than what was real. He learned it from me. I was the one who told him to smile at parties even when he was sad. I was the one who said, "Don't let them see you're upset. It makes you look weak." I taught him that vulnerability was a liability. So when he looked at me on his porch and saw a liability, he did exactly what I'd trained him to do. He got rid of it. But Noah was different because I didn't make him. He made himself. Despite me. Despite everything I said and did. He chose love anyway. I want you to understand something. When I created this test, I wasn't trying to be fair. I was trying to be honest. Because I knew, that if I just showed up and said, "I'm dying, I want to spend time with you," they'd all take me in. Richard would have given me a room. Steve would have hired a nurse. They would have done their duty. But that's not love. That's obligation. And I didn't want to die surrounded by obligation. I wanted to know if anyone would love me when I couldn't give them anything. When I was just me. There's a moment I think about a lot. A moment I didn't tell you about yet. It was the second week at Noah's place. I was sitting at the kitchen table, watching him and Maria make dinner together. They moved around each other so easily. He'd hand her a spoon without her asking. She'd taste something and add salt without telling him. They just knew. And I realized I'd never had that. Not with Thomas. Not with anyone. Thomas and I were partners in building wealth. We were good at making money. But we were terrible at making a life. We never cooked together. Never laughed over stupid things. Never had those small, quiet moments that make a marriage real. We had success. But Noah and Maria? They had something I'd never understood. They had each other. That night, Noah asked me if I was okay. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm just watching," I told him. "Watching what?" "You. Both of you. The way you are together." He smiled. "We're not fancy like Richard. We don't have." "You have everything," I said. He looked confused. "You have what matters," I continued. "You know that, right?" He glanced at Maria. She was washing dishes, humming to herself. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know." And that's when I realized the cruelest irony of all. I'd spent my entire life teaching my sons the wrong lesson. I taught Richard and Steve that success was everything. That image mattered. That you had to fight and claw and win. And they learned it perfectly. They became exactly what I made them. But Noah rejected everything I taught him. He chose a different path. A harder path. And in doing so, he became the only one who truly understood what I'd been searching for my whole life. When I wrote that will, I wasn't punishing Richard and Steve. I was holding up a mirror. I was showing them, and myself, what we'd become. People who valued things over people. Who chose comfort over connection. Who were so afraid of losing what we had that we forgot why we wanted it in the first place. The night before I died, I had a dream. I was young again. Maybe 30. I was standing in my big house in Seattle, walking from room to room. Every room was empty. No furniture. No pictures. No life. Just space. And I kept walking, looking for something. Someone? Then I heard laughter. I followed it outside, to the backyard. And there they were. All 3 of my boys. Young. Playing together. Richard was maybe 15. Steve was 10. Noah was a baby in my arms. Thomas was there too, younger, smiling. "Come sit with us," he said. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I looked back at the house. At all that empty space. "I have work to do," I said. "It can wait," Thomas said. "No, it can't." And I walked back inside. Back to the empty rooms. When I woke up, I was crying. Maria heard me. She came into the room. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I wasted it," I said. "Wasted what?" "All of it. All those years. I had everything I needed, and I walked away from it." She sat on the edge of the bed. "You're here now. But it's too late." "No." She took my hand. "It's not too late. You came back. That matters." But here's what I couldn't tell her. Here's what I couldn't tell anyone. It was too late. Too late to fix things with Richard and Steve. Too late to undo the damage. Too late to be the mother I should have been from the start. I got 3 weeks with Noah. 3 weeks out of 50 years. And while those 3 weeks were beautiful, while they taught me more than the previous 78 years combined, they didn't erase everything that came before. The irony is this. I finally learned what mattered. But I learned it with days left to live. I finally understood love. But I understood it too late to love the way I should have. I finally saw my sons clearly. But I saw them through the lens of a test I designed because I didn't trust them in the first place. Richard and Steve failed the test. But I failed them first. Long before they closed those doors. Long before they chose money over me. I closed doors on them. Every time I chose a meeting over a basketball game. Every time I signed a check instead of having a conversation. Every time I said not now and meant not ever. I was the one who taught them that love was transactional. And then I was shocked when they treated me like a transaction. So when Henderson read that will, and Richard and Steve looked at each other in shock. I wonder if they realized the truth. That I wasn't punishing them for failing. I was punishing them for becoming exactly what I made them. The day before I died, I asked Noah to take me somewhere. Where do you want to go? He asked. Anywhere, I said. I just want to see the world one more time. He understood. He didn't ask questions. We drove. We drove through Austin. Past the Capitol building. Past the university. Past neighborhoods I'd never seen before. Noah pointed things out as we went. That's where Maria and I had our first date. That taco place on the corner. That's the church where we got married. Just us and 2 witnesses. That's the park where I proposed. It was raining. I didn't have a ring yet. But I couldn't wait. He was showing me his life. The life he'd built without me. And it was beautiful. We stopped at an overlook outside the city. You could see everything from up there. The buildings. The hills. The sky stretching out forever. Noah helped me out of the truck. We sat on the tailgate together, legs dangling. It's pretty, I said. Yeah. We sat in silence for a while. Then Noah said, Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really lose all your money? My heart stopped. I'd been so careful. I'd kept the story consistent. I'd never slipped. But Noah had always been perceptive. What do you mean? I asked carefully. He looked at me. You're too smart to lose everything. You built an empire. You were always 3 steps ahead of everyone. I didn't say anything. So either something really bad happened, or he trailed off. Or what? Or you wanted to lose it. I could have lied. I should have lied. But I was so tired of lying. You're right, I said quietly. His eyes widened. I am? I didn't lose anything. I transferred it all into a trust. I made myself look broke on purpose. Why? I looked out at the city. At the life he'd built without my money. Without my help. I needed to know, I said. Before I died. I needed to know if any of you loved me. Or if you just loved what I could give you. Noah was quiet for a long time. And? He finally asked. What did you find out? I turned to him. Took his hand. I found out that the son I hurt the most was the only one who loved me at all. His eyes filled with tears. I always loved you, Mom. Even when you said those things. Even when you told me Maria wasn't good enough. I was hurt. I was angry. But I never stopped loving you. I know, I whispered. I know that now. We sat there as the sun started to set. Orange and pink painted across the sky. What happens now? Noah asked. With the money? Henderson has instructions, I said. When I'm gone, everything goes to you. Mom. Let me finish. I squeezed his hand. Richard and Steve are in the will too. But not the way they'll expect. I'm not leaving them money because they don't need it. They have their own. They've built their own lives. And me? You built something too. Something they couldn't buy. A marriage. A home. A life filled with love. But you did it without resources. Without help. And I want to give you what you deserve. I don't want it because I deserve it, Noah said. I didn't take you in for money. I know. That's exactly why you're getting it. Noah shook his head. This is going to destroy my relationship with my brothers. Maybe. Or maybe it'll teach them something. What could it possibly teach them? That love isn't something you buy. It's something you give. We drove home as the stars came out. Maria was waiting on the steps. She stood up when she saw us, smiling. Did you have a good drive? She asked. We did, I said. She helped me inside. Made me tea. Tucked a blanket around my legs. And I looked at her, really looked at her, and I thought about all the things I'd said 8 years ago. About how she wasn't good enough. About how Noah could do better. About how love wasn't enough. I'd been wrong about everything. That night, after Noah and Maria went to bed, I sat in the living room alone. I could hear them in the other room. Talking softly. Laughing about something. And I felt it. Peace. For the first time in decades, I felt at peace. Not because I was dying. But because I finally understood. I thought about my life. About all the things I'd built. All the money I'd made. All the properties I'd bought. And I realized none of it mattered. Not the houses. Not the investments. Not the empire. The only thing that mattered was sitting in that other room. A son who loved me enough to take me in when I had nothing. A daughter-in-law who forgave me for the cruel things I'd said. A home that was too small and too cramped and too perfect. I wrote one last letter that night. Not to Henderson. Not for the will. Just for me. I wrote. I spent 78 years chasing the wrong things. I thought security meant money. I thought love meant control. I thought family meant obligation. I was wrong. Security is knowing someone will hold you when you're scared. Love is giving without expecting anything back. Family is choosing each other, every single day. I wish I'd learned this sooner. But I'm grateful I learned it at all. And I'm grateful that in the end, I came home. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Then I went to bed. I climbed under the covers in Noah's bed, the bed he'd given up for me, and I closed my eyes. My chest hurt. My breathing was shallow. I knew this was it. I knew I wouldn't wake up. But I wasn't scared. My last thought wasn't about Richard or Steve. It wasn't about the money or the will or the test. It was about Noah. About the way he'd hugged me when I arrived. About the way he'd held my hand through those 3 weeks. About the way he'd loved me when I had nothing left to give. And I thought. This is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. And then I went to sleep. And I didn't wake up. But the story wasn't over. I wasn't there for what happened next. But Henderson told Noah everything later. He said I'd planned it all down to the smallest detail. Every word of that will. Every instruction. Every consequence. Because I didn't just want to leave Noah money. I wanted to leave all 3 of them something more important. A truth they couldn't ignore. Henderson said the funeral was small. Just like I'd requested. No big service. No fancy flowers. No crowds of people pretending they knew me. Just family. Real family. Noah and Maria sat in the front row. Richard and Steve sat in the back. They didn't speak to each other. After the service, Henderson stood up. He was holding a sealed envelope. Mrs. Vance left specific instructions, he said. She wanted me to read her will immediately after the funeral. All beneficiaries must be present. Richard straightened his tie. Steve checked his watch. They thought this was finally it. The moment they'd been waiting for. Henderson opened the envelope. And he began to read. I, Elara Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Standard opening. Richard and Steve relaxed slightly. Henderson continued. First, I want to address my sons Richard and Steve directly. They both looked up. You are reading this because you came to my funeral. Thank you for that. I know it was inconvenient for you. I know you had to travel. I know your schedules are busy. Steve shifted uncomfortably. I want you to know that I don't hate you. I don't even blame you. I made you who you are. I taught you that money mattered more than people. That success mattered more than love. That image mattered more than truth. What is this? Richard muttered. Henderson kept reading. 3 months before I died, I came to each of you. I was dressed in rags. I told you I'd lost everything. I asked for help. Richard's face went pale. Richard, you gave me $500 and sent me to a motel. Steve, you offered to put me in a state nursing home. Steve stood up. This is. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Henderson said firmly. Or I'll have you removed. Steve sat. Neither of you asked me to stay. Neither of you offered me a room. Neither of you even asked if I was okay. The room was silent. I wasn't really broke. It was a test. I needed to know if you loved me, or if you loved my money. Richard's hands were shaking. You failed. Henderson paused. Then he continued. To Richard, I leave nothing. You built your empire. You made your choices. You have everything you need. You don't need anything from me. That's insane, Richard said. His voice cracked. I'm contesting this. You can try, Henderson said calmly. But the will is legally sound. Mrs. Vance was evaluated by 3 separate psychiatrists. She was of sound mind when she made these decisions. Henderson turned the page. To Steve, I also leave nothing. You have your career. Your reputation. Your public image. Those things mattered more to you than I did. So keep them. That's your inheritance. Steve's face was red. This is revenge. She's dead, Mr. Vance, Henderson said quietly. This isn't revenge. It's consequence. Then Henderson turned to Noah. Noah was staring at the floor, tears streaming down his face. To my son Noah, who took in a homeless woman when he barely had anything himself. Who gave me his bed. Who shared his food. Who loved me when I had nothing to offer. Noah looked up. I leave everything. The Seattle house. All bank accounts. All properties. All investments. All assets. Henderson paused. The total value is approximately $80 million. The room erupted. Richard was on his feet. This is bullshit. Sit down. Henderson's voice cut through the chaos. Or I will have security remove you from this property. Richard sat, breathing hard. Henderson continued reading. Noah, I know you don't want this money. I know you'll feel guilty. I know you'll wish I'd split it 3 ways. Noah was sobbing now. But I'm not giving you this money because I love you more than your brothers. I'm giving it to you because you're the only one who loved me without it. There's more, Henderson said. He pulled out 3 additional envelopes. Mrs. Vance left personal letters for each of you. He handed them out. Richard grabbed his and tore it open. Richard's letter. Richard. You're probably angry right now. I understand. You think I betrayed you. You think this is unfair. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you visited without asking for money? When was the last time you treated me like a mother instead of a bank account? I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I need you to understand. You have everything you need to be successful. You're smart. You're driven. You're capable. But you don't know how to love. And money can't teach you that. I hope one day you figure it out. I hope one day you understand what you lost. Not the money. Me. Love, Mom. Richard crumpled the letter. His hands were shaking. He stood up and walked out without saying another word. Steve's letter. Steve. You always were the charmer. The politician. The one who knew how to say the right thing at the right time. But you never knew how to do the right thing. You told me I'd be bad for your campaign. You told me I'd hurt your image. And you were right. A homeless mother doesn't look good in ads. But I wasn't asking you to put me in your ads, Steve. I was asking you to put me in your home. There's a difference. I hope your career gives you what you're looking for. I hope all those votes and speeches and photo ops fill the empty space inside you. But I don't think they will. Because you can't vote your way into love. You have to earn it. Love, Mom. Steve read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully, put it in his pocket, and left. He didn't say goodbye to Noah. He didn't look back. Noah's letter. Noah. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things I said about Maria. I'm sorry for the years we lost. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to choose between me and your happiness. You chose right. And I was wrong. I'm giving you this money not because you earned it, but because you're the only one who didn't try to. You loved me when I had nothing. You took me in when I was desperate. You gave me the last peaceful weeks of my life. I can never repay you for that. But I can give you this, the freedom to build whatever life you want. To never worry about money. To give your children everything you didn't have. Not things. Not houses. Not accounts. But security. Stability. Peace. Use this money however you want. Build a bigger garage. Buy a house. Travel the world. Or keep living in that trailer if it makes you happy. Just promise me one thing, don't let it change who you are. Because who you are is perfect. You're kind. You're generous. You're real. You're everything I should have been. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for letting me come home. I love you, baby. Always. Mom. Noah read the letter 3 times. Maria held him while he cried. And Henderson said something I'd asked him to say. Something I needed Noah to hear. She told me to tell you, this isn't a reward. It's a responsibility. She's trusting you to do what's right. Not just with the money. But with your brothers. With your family. With yourself. Noah looked up. What does that mean? It means she hoped you'd be the one to fix what she broke. And that's exactly what Noah tried to do. Even though it almost destroyed him. 5 years have passed since I died. I'm not here to see it, but I can imagine. And Henderson kept me informed, in whatever way the universe allows these things. Here's what happened to my sons. Here's what my choice created. Noah never moved into the Seattle house. He sold it, like I said before. $12 million. But here's what I didn't mention, he bought a small house in Austin instead. 3 bedrooms. A yard. Nothing fancy. He expanded the garage. Hired 6 employees now. Pays them well. Offers benefits. He still works there every day. Still gets grease under his fingernails. Still comes home tired. But he comes home to Maria. To little Elara, who's 3 now. To a second baby on the way. He's happy. Not because of the money. But because he knows who he is. Richard took longer to come around. For 2 years, he didn't speak to Noah. Didn't call. Didn't visit. He threw himself into work. Bought more properties. Closed bigger deals. But something changed. His marriage fell apart. His wife left him. Said he was never really there. Said he loved his work more than he loved her. She was right. One night, 6 months after his divorce, Richard showed up at Noah's house at 2 in the morning. Noah opened the door in his pajamas. Richard was drunk. Crying. "I don't know how to do this," Richard said. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am." Noah brought him inside. Made him coffee. Let him sleep on the couch. In the morning, they talked. Really talked. For the first time in maybe their entire lives. "I was so angry at her," Richard said. "At Mom. For what she did. I know. But I get it now. She wasn't punishing me. She was showing me." "Showing you what?" Richard looked at his coffee cup. "That I'm empty. I built this whole life, and there's nothing inside it. No one who actually cares about me. No one I actually care about." Noah didn't say anything. "You have something I never figured out how to have," Richard said. "You have a family. A real one. Not just people who need things from you. You could have that too." "I don't know how." Noah leaned forward. "You start by showing up. Not when it's convenient. Not when you need something. Just showing up." Richard started coming around more after that. Not often. Maybe once every few months. But he'd call. Check in. Ask about the baby. He met little Elara. Held her awkwardly, like he wasn't sure what to do with a child. But he tried. And Noah never threw the will in his face. Never mentioned the money. Never made him feel small. He just let Richard be his brother again. Steve is different. He never came back. He won his election. Then another one. He's a state senator now. Thinking about running for Congress. Noah's tried reaching out. Called him every few months for 3 years. Steve never answered. Finally, Noah sent one last letter. It said, "Steve, I know you're angry. I know you think what happened was unfair. Maybe it was. But I'm not Mom. I don't have an agenda. I just want my brother back. If you ever change your mind, I'm here. Always, Noah." Steve never responded. But Noah kept the door open. Just in case. Maria asked Noah once if he regretted it. "Regretted what?" he said. "Taking your mom in. The will. All of it." He thought about it for a long time. "No," he finally said. "I don't regret it. I just wish things were different." "Different how?" "I wish she hadn't felt like she needed to test us. I wish we'd all just loved her. The way we should've." Maria squeezed his hand. "You did. But Richard and Steve didn't. And now they're." He trailed off. "I don't know if they'll ever forgive her. Or me. That's their choice to make," Maria said gently. "You can't fix it for them. I know. But I keep thinking, what if Mom was wrong? What if the will just made everything worse? But here's what I want Noah to know. What I wish I could tell him now. I wasn't wrong. Not about the test. Not about the will. Not about any of it. Yes, it hurt them. Yes, it created a rift. Yes, it made things complicated. But it also revealed the truth. And the truth is this. Richard and Steve didn't lose their inheritance because of me. They lost it because of themselves. For 78 years, I enabled them. I fixed their problems. I wrote their checks. I let them treat me like a resource instead of a person. And when I finally stopped, when I finally asked them to love me without getting anything in return, they couldn't do it. That's not my fault. It's not even really theirs. It's just the truth. But Noah loved me when it cost him something. When it was inconvenient. When it was hard. When it meant giving up his bed and his time and his peace. He loved me anyway. And that's the difference. I think about the life I lived. About all the years I spent chasing the wrong things. And I think about those 3 weeks in Noah's trailer. 3 weeks out of 78 years. That's all I got. But it was enough. Because in those 3 weeks, I felt more loved than I had in my entire life. Not because Noah had money to give me. But because he gave me himself. If I could go back, would I do things differently? Yes. I'd call Noah the day after his wedding. I'd apologize. I'd ask to meet Maria. I'd be there for them. I'd tell Richard and Steve that I loved them, but I wouldn't let them use me. I'd set boundaries. I'd demand respect. I'd show them what love actually looks like. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is make different choices going forward. And that's what I hope my will does. Not punish. Not reward. But teach. I hope Richard learns that success without love is just emptiness. I hope Steve learns that image without substance is just a mask. And I hope Noah learns that he was always enough. Always. Even without my money. Even without my approval. He was always enough. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Not the drama. Not the money. Not the test. But this. Love is a choice you make every single day. It's not about grand gestures or big moments. It's about showing up. It's about being present. It's about giving without keeping score. And if you're lucky, if you're very, very lucky, someone will love you back the same way. Not because of what you have. But because of who you are. I died in a trailer in Texas. No mansion. No staff. No luxury. Just my son and his wife in the next room. Just love. And that was everything. A mother's love should be unconditional. But a child's love? That has to be earned. Not with money. Not with gifts. But with presence. With time. With showing up when it's hard. I spent 78 years learning that lesson. Don't wait as long as I did. Tell the people you love that you love them. Not someday. Today. Because you never know when someday runs out. My name was Alara Vance. And this was my story. If this story made you think about your own family, about the choices you've made or the ones you're still making, I'd love to hear it. Not for me. I'm gone. But maybe for yourself. Sometimes the most important conversations we have are the ones we have quietly, in our own hearts, about what really matters. Don't wait until it's too late to figure that out.